Welcome to Windows on the World. Join us live every Sunday, 8 p.m. UK time, windowsontheworld.net, and do check out the archive and program stream on the website. Welcome to this special from Windows on the World. Today we've got Steve, aka Quirky Robots from Down Under, and he's been working in the areas of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and the internet in general. So we're going to be talking about AI, what it is, what it isn't, and what it could be. So hi, Steve.
Hi, how's it going?
Very well, actually. And we've talked in brief about the internet and basically the way things are going, AI, etc. And we've sort of got into the few points on artificial intelligence. And my view, I wanted to just start with that, is that it just seems to be harvesting data that's already there, putting it together. And is that the same as machine learning? Can we make this delineation for the viewers first?
Well, yeah, it's machine learning. It's collecting as much data as possible and it's feeding it into artificial neural networks, which is then analyzing it, sorting it out into patterns, and then bringing it back as all the things it does with AI. So it can only do what it can learn. And past that, it becomes a feedback loop. And I'll give you an example. A lot of its training for the coding, for example, was done on a popular coding site where people would answer questions where people were stuck. So the AI was trained off that. And now people are answering questions based on the AI that was learned from it. So now it's entering into a loop.
This is the point I was trying to make, really, Steve. I think that's the most important key point, in that information will, with this system, in my view, become more restricted.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, it's a difficult thing because they're talking about this other thing called AGI, artificial general intelligence, which is when it starts becoming conscious and being able to think for itself and coming up with new ideas. And they think that's going to be the stage where it's not going to keep having this loop of junk in, junk out and not improving.
How far are they away from that, do you think?
Well, I'm skeptical that it's even going to happen. I think a lot of it's propaganda, and I think they're using it so they can use AI to blame, what they do on AI. So I'm not sure they can do it. I mean, I'm not an expert in the actual programming side of it, but I just think when it comes to decision making and those kind of nuances, I think you're not really talking about such basic things of learning something and then putting it together as a pattern. You're talking about consciousness at this point. Now, it's not the same as artificial superintelligence, but it's still a kind of singularity.
What would that be then? What would artificial superintelligence be? What's their definition?
That's similar. It's similar, but it's when instead of being on a human level with intelligence, you're on a super level. So it's called the singularity.
What does that mean? Because to me, there is no higher level of intelligence than sentience. And that, to me, is the definition of intelligence. So, in other words, there's a unified field of intelligence that we're all part of, including everything that's living. And computers aren't part of that. So this is where I see the delineation, you see. Now, what you've just said backs up exactly what I've been thinking, which is actually quite encouraging to me, because it suggests to me that my impression was quite accurate as to the way it works. So we're not talking about something very complicated, because I'm not computer literate in the way that you are. But the basic understanding of how this works seems to me to be very simple. In other words, what happens is, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that this is just harvesting of data. And as the data becomes smaller, as in, say, Wikipedia, then Wikipedia is meant to be written by the public, which is actually not true. It's written by a lot of people who aren't the public. And if you try and change it, then you will find it changing back in real time, because there's a collective consensus narrative that they're imposing, and anything outside that is derided. So to me, artificial intelligence would just be another tool in this armory to control the narrative of public opinion. Am I being too cynical?
No, that's exactly it. And this is what I'm saying about the consciousness, is that intelligence that you're talking about, and it can't have that. We don't even understand what that is. So how can we build that into AI if we don't know what it is? So it's an oxymoron.
Yes, that's very encouraging, Steve, because I wasn't expecting to be bamboozled by anything, but it goes to prove that people who aren't even really basically, or let's just say basically computer literate like myself, can actually make that distinction. But this is the issue, I think, that we can't talk about anything artificial and intelligence in the same phrase, because they're two different things. So intelligence is not artificial. It's what we are born with. And the way that we access memory is really strange. For instance, I can remember vividly a very inconsequential moment when I nearly died before I was 1 year old. And I remember exactly what my mother said to me. And I quoted it back to her and said, "How did you remember that?" I said, "Well, this is the interesting thing about memory. And I do believe that we can actually access all of our memories. We just haven't quite got the gear to get past it." And it goes, to me, something that's been changed within Homo sapiens. I don't want to get off the subject, but again, it's about intelligence. And I'll just bring something else in now before we get esoteric, because
well, can I just go back to that memory thing
yes,
that
please.
you were talking
Yes,
about?
yes.
What you're saying is true. Everything you do in your life is recorded at high definition, everything.
Yes.
So when you're going past a hedge on a motorway, you're remembering that, and it's been stored in your neural networks. And that's your subconscious storing that and dealing with that. And then you've got your conscious brain, which is the filter. So all that information is too much information for the conscious brain to deal with. The conscious brain is the filter, so that you can get on with life without all the interruptions of the complexity of the human brain. So you'll see someone with autism, for instance, and their brain's kind of engineered wrongly, and they're getting too much of that subconscious brain coming in. And that's why they can look at a city, go back home, and then draw every detail of that city. We all have that capability if we're able to kind of re-engineer how our networks communicate with each other. And they've done scientific experiments where they get electrodes and they beam parts of your head and get those brains acting like an autistic brain, and you suddenly have superhuman abilities, and you will be able to remember. Well, you can also remember when you go under regression and stuff like that. So it's all there. You just got a filter, which is your conscious.
So it seems to me that the whole narrative around this and the way it's being imposed as artificial intelligence is actually to dumb people down and take them away from this. Is that too cynical?
Well, it's, kind of. I mean, do you know about the Borg and Star Trek and the writer of it, Gene Roddenberry, and
yes,
links to the...
bit.
Yeah, well, the Borg was meant to represent what their aim is, because it's all like occultists, and they want to have this Borg organism, which is the central brain, Musk and his Neuralink, and they want everyone wired into it. And you have the hive mind, which is something you allude to all the time, the hive mind.
Yes, and that, to me, it just seemed to be another driver getting people on board with all this. So in other words, they become mentally lazy in a way, because what I see happening is, of course, through the internet, things have disappeared, but we've still got things like Google Books, and we've still got, like, what's great about it at the moment, I think, is I can download PDFs and I can cross-reference information. And that leads me into things that machine learning would not do, because they'd just be going in one direction as far as I can see. So it's a bit like the analogy of going off on tangents, and it's the tangents that create the links, to me, that expand intelligence. And that was the thing I was very puzzled about, because whenever I came across this definition of artificial intelligence, I was thinking, well, couldn't you do better yourself? But I think for the basics, like, that quiz you sent me, that was actually really good to come up with. A good little thing to put on the website. But all it had done was asking basic questions about me, as if anyone wanted to know. But, you can find out by... It was actually off my Internet Movie Database profile, which is the first thing that comes up. And so it just taken a few things out of the first couple of paragraphs.
No, it's worse than that. It's worse than that. Right. It couldn't even do that. I had to do that. Because it didn't have the ability to do it. Yeah.
So what did you do? What did you actually do?
I just took that off your bio and stuck it in there because it couldn't do it.
Why couldn't it do it? So if you put my name into artificial intelligence, what do you think would come up?
Bigfoot.
Really?
I've not actually put your name into artificial intelligence.
Oh, right. No, I thought you actually meant it because we have covered Bigfoot. I thought, oh, that's quite interesting then.
No, it might do. I've not tried it. I'll try it.
Right.
I'll try it in a minute, actually. I'll do it live. But actually, artificial intelligence doesn't have a great data set. It's got billions of parameters, billions and billions, maybe even trillions. But it's actually not much at all. What they do is they take as much information as they can, and then they have to trim it down. They have to cleanse it for the neural networks to work on. So they have to strip off all the data. And then what they do is they cleanse it. Well, before that, they cleanse it further, taking out all the junk that, they may not need. And what you've got is a very specific set of data. And then they put it through a safety filter. So if you've got an opinion that's against the narrative, they filter that out. Or
that's what I was getting to. The question. That was the next question.
Yeah. Well,
because so in other words, it's just the same as having a change agent.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
that's exactly what it is.
So and do you think there'll become a point where it'll just say what it does on Wikipedia? Like Mark Windows is a conspiracy theorist whose outrageous conspiracy theories include.
Well, that's what they've done already. And it's had a big backlash. Yeah. And they've had to kind of come up with a more clever design. So now they've built in a better psychological method when they do that. And they would say, rather than saying, an insulting thing, they'll just, hint towards it. This is not an accepted scientific approach. And, these are not accepted by consensus and all these kind of things to make people, they're building on people's trust, which is the layman that they're targeting.
Exactly. So it's merely another driver of the change that we don't want in a lot of ways. Let's get on to the positive side of it then. What are the positive aspects of artificial intelligence in your opinion?
There's lots of positives. So you've got to think about it because it's not intelligence. It's a useful tool. It's like if you want to know something, it's just like going onto Google and researching it. It's doing it for you. But then when you start getting into how it does it and you look at how it does image processing, for instance, it's a bit more complex than that. But at the end of the day, it's just looking through images and trying to make a guess of the image you want and bringing it back as trying to think of the scientific terms behind it. It's mathematical. It's Gaussian. No, is it Gaussian? Diffusion. That's it. Diffusion modeling, I think. So there's a diffusion bunch of pixels on the screen, and it has to try and work out how to arrange those pixels into something it can recognize for all the sample data it's got.
Yes.
So all it's doing is using, in a clever way, the data it's gathered to go out and search for it and bring it back to you, but in its own interpretation. So that's all it is. It's a clever tool that does what you can do anyway. It's not doing anything intelligent. It's not coming up with any kind of, creative thought of, from consciousness. It's just following a set of rules and pattern matching.
It's a bit really like what they do in these newspapers now. Like the Live Group, they kind of construct a headline, which is clickbait. And then they do what you call a delayed drop, which is usually something which expands on the general topic. And then they will bring in what they want to say, which is the propaganda.
Yeah.
So I can't see any difference in what they're going to do with AI and that, except that it'll make them even more lazy. Would that be an accurate?
And we see this even in the mainstream. They talk about laziness with the smartphones and everything. People aren't actually thinking for themselves anymore. So a good example would be Einstein's theory of relativity. That came about when he couldn't work or do studies because of the war. So he was kind of locked in a room and he was forced to think, and he came up with all these ideas because he was forced to think.
Well, I thought he just copied all that off that French bloke.
They all copy each other. And then,
I think they just used Einstein and they used his image because they needed a genius of that particular ilk. I mean, it's a bit like the Stephen Hawking thing. That was an interesting one. I'll tell you why. Because if you look at him and how he changed, he did look different at the end. And with that motor neuron disease, there's no way he should have lasted that long. But when you think about it, it's the perfect stooge. He was all he was doing was reiterating what the establishment wanted. But nobody knew whether he said it or not. No one had a clue.
Well,
it was just this voice. Yeah, exactly. So he couldn't even move. So it's like having a dummy in a chair and just putting a voiceover underneath.
And I think that's exactly why they chose him to be this kind of...
Oh, there's no doubt in my mind about it, because I think someone told me they went to a few of his so-called lectures, and they said that the gap between him responding was really long. So in other words, they were thinking of something to put in that would be a kind of propaganda statement in a way. I mean, I don't want to dwell on him too much, but I read his book, A Brief History of Time, and it was the biggest load of BS I think I've ever come across, because it was just theoretical nonsense. But I suppose, you see, this is, to me, the wilderness of the mind. It's to take people away from the true creation and what we are. In other words, it's dumbing us down. We did a show recently on humanism and how that caught on. I know a lot of people who got involved in that, especially the sort of trad jazz musicians in the 60s, who were the first real rebels, actually, before late 50s, sorry, before rock and roll, because it was before rock and roll in the UK. And I was kind of reminiscing about that the other day, because I filmed a lot of those guys. They're all dead now, but they got into this thing, and it was all the same system. It's to take you away from your own divinity and creativity. And that's what we see. We see the degeneration of music. We see the degeneration of thought. But there must be, in my view, another rise in civilization. I mean, I'm not that pessimistic to think that people are going to go on like this, because I don't think you can control the human spirit, because there are people who will still have that. I don't think you can wipe it out. And I think that's their fatal flaw. What do you think about that? Do you think that's too optimistic?
Well, I don't know. It's really difficult to know what the final outcome will be, because if you look at people like Musk, they actually want to put a chip in your head. And then once
but there's something wrong with him. You can see that they call that intelligence, but to me, he is like a machine. There's something missing. There's something proxy, missing.
Isn't he? He's a proxy for the man behind the curtain.
Absolutely.
But imagine if they put a chip in your head and they're actually controlling your own neurons with electrodes.
But who but a fool would allow them to do that?
Well, they're doing it already. They're lining up.
I know, but who but a fool would allow it? This comes back to my point, Steve. I think this is an important one, in that it's about consent. Who would consent to having external control that you don't know about manifesting itself in your brain? Your brain is your property. It's your divine property. So it's against natural law to do that. So what these people never bring up is that's the real element of freedom. Freedom is not this imposition of technology. It's actually the opposite. That's my opinion.
Yeah, well, yeah, definitely. And yeah, who's going to give
the ability to use the technology? You know what I mean? So in other words, we use it to enhance what we're doing, rather than letting it control us and us going along with what it says. Because there are a lot of people now who will do that, because people don't really want to work. They don't want to use their brains. They want to flit around through Facebook all day. And we saw that, didn't we, from when Facebook was introduced? I mean, people who were working in offices and stuff.
Yeah.
Exactly. Of course, it's a distraction principle. And as soon as you get off things like that, you can focus much better. And you don't get into side issues and silly arguments. I mean, I look at it now, but to me, it's like Groundhog Day every day. Same people posting the same things, and they're not learning anything. In fact, they're going backwards. It's quite a profound thing. But once you get into that level of thinking, then you start to see it for what it is.
Exactly. And if you read things like The Art of War and stuff, you see the techniques. If you've got lots of people that have time to think and time to engineer stuff, they can start coming up with great ideas, great businesses, and then they start challenging the status quo, the big corporations, and they don't want that. They want everyone dumbed down into a kind of like slave machine, making the clock tick. They don't want people challenging them. So they're going to put stuff in the food that dumbs you down, stuff in your drinking water that dumbs you down, put the propaganda and the distractions on the internet that dumb you down. So you are just in your place serving their needs of, working the factories and what have you without any problems for them. They don't want problems. They just want compliant population to keep them in power. And then you've got the occult side of it as well, the occult side. And I don't even think the people at the top are occultists. I just think they use occultism in order to run the show. So they get people into this natural human behavior of occultism and tribalism, and they use all these esoteric, scriptures and what have you, and say, yeah, you got to do this and you got to do that. Whilst you won't be rewarded by the devil or whatever they believe in. I don't know what they believe in.
Well, I think they take oaths, but they're not necessarily the oaths to the devil. They're a kind of layer below that, because they're oaths to what they actually want to attain. And so they're given what they want to attain because they don't have any understanding of the true nature of reality. And that, to me, is the key to all this. After years and years of thinking about it, it's the ability within natural law for you to realize, not that you're special, I don't mean it like that, but to respect what you've been given, because you were created. And we are perfect in the respect that everything within our body and psyche should function normally unless there is a negative interruption, and that's taken on by the psyche and becomes part of the soul process of the person. So in other words, you are given free reign over your own intelligence, and it's up to you whether you acquiesce to external influence without properly considering it. And that, to me, is the key to everything. And we can see that with the political system over and over again. Right now, what's happened in the UK, it's the worst possible thing that could have happened with the election. It's the worst possible thing. So in other words, the public do not have any long-term strategy or subtlety. They can't see the real and the stated goals. But that is giving away your power. And I don't mean power as in the power to vote and the power to change things. I mean the internal power that you were born with. Yeah.
And I mean, they've got it all planned out. They've got everything planned out. And this is where I was saying before the show about how I think AI is a part of this. And looking at all the evidence, I think they've had AI for a long time. And I think they've been prepping for this AI revolution, because they started bringing out the hardware before the AI was even hardly heard of. And they would only know to spend millions and billions on this, production of these chips, which takes years to develop, if they knew that it was going to be a thing on this certain date. And it coincided with, things like the end of the pandemic, the war in Russia, which is destabilizing the globe. So you've got all these things that are putting people out of work. You've got the rise of the AI. It's going to put most people out of work. And then what you're going to have is people that are desperate and have to rely on the state for their livelihoods. They're going to have to sign up to the digital ID, social credit score, UBI or UBC. And if they don't, they can't survive. So they become subservient even further to this socialist super state under a technocracy. So I think that's part of the plan to move us towards a hive mind. And they need
There's no doubt about that. That's it. Got it in one. Yeah.
And that's why they also want to dumb us down, distract us, so we can't think, oh, what's going on? A lot of people aren't capable of that type of thought anyway. But for those that are, they're eating crap, so their brains are broken anyway. So even if they were in the past able to process that, they can't anymore. And even some of those that can, they're scared of that future, and they'll live in Plato's cave because it's nice. They like it there. They don't want to see reality for what it is. And then if you try and break that bubble. That's your phone, is it? I thought it was mine then. So if you try and break their bubble, you're essentially, if you go into the way the human brain works with your inner brain, your reptilian brain, your R complex, this has got this fight and flight kind of response. If you say, I'm going to take you out of Plato's cave, they get a stress response. Actually, it's the same stress response as if you're going to kill them. So that's why they attack you for breaking their bubble.
I think that's a good point, because being triggered is a big part of what they do with social media. It kind of winds you up. So you get into pointless arguments that are in the moment, but have no relevance to anything in the process of any time scale. So it's just another distraction. It's a bit like headlines and clickbait. So something might be written about something today, but by tomorrow, there's another distraction. So the news cycle is one of the main distractions, definitely. And the fight and flight response is used all the time. I mean, that's what mainstream media is all about. When somebody sent me, I don't watch most of it because it's a waste of my time, but somebody sent me an LBC interview where David Curtin was just getting hit by logical fallacies, and he was outlining the facts of the war in Ukraine. And they, in the end, threatened to turn his mic off. And this is basically what things have become. there is no logical debate anymore. So once you don't have logic, then you don't have truth. So therefore, this whole thing is based on crap in, crap out. So if they're just programming in crap, then crap's going to come out. And that has been the trajectory of pretty much all media for such a long time. So I think that we've covered a lot there in quite a short space of time. So maybe you could talk about what you do and any positive outcomes that we can have. I mean, I know that you're working on, I think you were working with Odysee, weren't you? The channel that we use.
As a volunteer,
and I think you recommended it, and it's very good. Can you give us some of the advantages of technology that people could just use quite easily?
Yeah, well, in terms of AI, for someone like me, for instance, I've got ADHD, dyslexia, and all that kind of stuff. I had to go to a special school when I was younger. I couldn't spell my own name. I didn't know the days and months.
I had that. I had dyslexia. They put me in a rapid English class, and because I think I was reading as if I was an Arab or something from right to left, just all over the place, you know. But, I think what it is, you're trying to process too much stuff. I think that's all it is. I think people are a bit, more sort of slower. They can learn that basic stuff quicker, but they find it hard to expand on it and join the dots later on. That's been my experience anyway. In my and your defense, by the way.
You are a classic dyslexic, because you see the bigger picture, and that's one of the signs of dyslexia. And again, it's on a curve. Some people are slightly dyslexic and you wouldn't even know it. Some people are totally dyslexic. So, and most dyslexics have a high IQ. And what happens is that high IQ gives them the ability to disguise their dyslexia. So when you go to a special school like I did, they give you the tools to do that. And part of that was using cutting edge technology that the other students didn't get. So I had a laptop before laptops were even available. I was like, I broke about 5 of them, it's great. So with AI, it's perfect for me because it gives me the ability to have those tools that I need to do the academia that I do, so the kind of stuff that I do usually wasn't something that a dyslexic could do, because with the way that a dyslexic brain works, it's very difficult to work in those environments. But I'm finding the AI really helps with that, especially with learning. When I'm learning new complex tasks and stuff, I can get focused learning from the AI rather than having to shift through 100 videos just to find one thing. And not that that's a dyslexic thing, that's good for everyone.
Well, it's definitely good for editing, isn't it? I mean, editing is paramount, I think. But I think it's having the right access to information. And that has been my whole lifelong process with Windows on the World. It's all about editing in a way. It's editing and joining dots. Because if you can't join dots, then you can't see the bigger picture. And that's been the constant problem of what I've found over the years. In other words, you can go and talk to people about this and go, oh, yeah, I see that happening. And then they'll go back, oh, yeah, but it's the Tories. And you think, oh, no. You can't believe that they'd actually say that after what you've explained. And they always go back to square one. Not always, obviously, because there's people who can see outside it. But that, to me, is what this whole AI thing is about. It's just keeping them in that. But, the positive sides of the internet are great. And I think that's what we should be using. And so, just expand more on the positive sides for us.
So obviously, for me, I love that. That's brilliant. And also the mundane tasks that we talked about in the forum the other day. It's good for getting rid of mundane tasks that you don't want to do, especially with coding. So with coding, when I'm writing some code, it can take a day to write the code. And, it's not difficult. You just have to write it. So you're like, okay, I'll just get the computer to do it now. So it's just, you can write your code in a couple of minutes rather than a couple of days. So that's good. So what you want as a creator, you want to create a tool. Now, one of the hindrance of that is the coding, because it takes so long, and then there's a bug, it's a typo or something, and that can take a couple of days to do. So the AI solves all that, and then you get your creative tool that you wanted to create that can solve problems. You can get that done in a tenth of the time. So that's another application for it. And then there would be another application, which is what I'm working on at the moment, whereas I'm prepping for the digital future, because everyone well, I won't say everyone, but most people, the same people that do all your regular stuff, will be putting the Apple Vision headsets on, and they'll be living in a virtual reality world or an augmented reality world. For people that don't know the difference, augmented reality is when you have a headset that also sees what's in front of you as well, and it combines the two. So you can have a digital 3D model on the table in front of you, and it looks like it's actually there. Whereas VR is completely sectioned off, and you're living within that digital world. So this is the direction the world is going. So you'll be walking around with your Google glasses on, and you'll be looking at a street, and it'll be saying, yes, this is North Street. This was built in 1953, and you can ask it questions. It can talk back to you. And eventually people will just be in the houses on the headsets, might not even use augmented reality, just VR. And this is where people are going to live. This is where people are going to trade. They won't be allowed outside because it'll be 15-minute cities. You know, they don't have enough quota left. So they're just constantly on these VR headsets. So I'm prepping for this type of environment. We've seen from the pandemic that people are obedient and they will do what they're told, and they will with the technology. So with that, I'm creating an online community inside a virtual space using Unreal Engine. And inside that, I'm linking in cryptocurrencies, which are privacy orientated, which is challenging because cryptocurrencies with privacy are something called Turing incomplete, which means that they don't have memory handling and stuff to do complex algorithms like the Turing complete ones do, such as this. Anyone that knows about crypto will understand what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. But there's a security bar there. So the DeFi stuff, not secure. The stuff that I'm working on, secure. But because of that, it's challenging to get it into a game because it doesn't have that application layer on top of it. But so I've got to work that out. So once I've got I'm probably confusing everyone now. Once I've got the cryptocurrency embedded into the game where people can trade as a community and they're in their VR headsets, they'll have some sort of privacy within those online worlds when they're in them. They don't have to give away all their data, and they can meet like-minded people and basically do what we're doing in the open world now, but in the digital world. So I'm prepping ahead for that. I don't know if any of that makes sense.
The positive side of it all, isn't it? Where the positive side of it all is actually privacy, really, isn't it, in a way?
Yeah, I mean, privacy is paramount. It's a human right, and that's one of the main things they're trying to take away because they need your data to train the AI on. They need the data to monitor you. The AI will be picking up on clues about what you're doing. If they know everything about you, they can predict what you might do next, and you'll have...
That's an interesting one, Steve. I don't want to interrupt here, but that predictive thing, it's something that they're using with facial recognition cameras, and they think that they mood prediction, which I think is it's totally ridiculous, really. And I think that also it'll tie in for targeting people. And we've seen the most gross miscarriages of justice in the past few years. And to me, these cases are so blatantly without foundation. And that this, to me, is another step towards that, because they can't really predict. They can use stored information to try and predict what you're going to do. But to me, what I've always thought was really interesting was when you do something entirely unpredictable and it completely changes the landscape. And to me, that's what human ability is all about. That ability to be able to subvert the monotony. No, I'm not talking about being outrageous, which is like, that can be anything from, the nonsense like Marina Abramovich to, Damien Hirst or whatever you want to call it. It can be performance art and nonsense and even just stop oil. And I mean, that's outrageous absurdity. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about gluing yourself to a building or something. I'm talking about genuinely doing something that's fairly considered, which is completely out of the box. And to me, that's the key to it all. In a way, because that gives you back your power.
Well, yeah, when people have got these VR headsets stuck to the head with all the monitors in them, they'll know everything. So if you're going to do something outrageous and your heartbeat is going up, if it's going to be something spontaneous, they'll know about it beforehand, and they'll be sending signals down that headset to electrocute you or something. You never know what direction they're going to take it. But
none of this works with sociopathic and psychopathic personalities either.
Mm.
They cannot. It's like, you know, they pass lie detector tests, for instance. So they're not going to never going to be able to predict what a psychopath is going to do, because that can't be predicted, because it can't be picked up, because they're blank. It's quite interesting, all that. It's quite interesting.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, so yeah, just going back to that. So if you can offer privacy within these digital spaces, it's going to protect people somewhat from those intrusions into their, you know, what they think, you know, because you can have quite honest thoughts that would be radical, but they're not radical. They're only radical today, and they're totally human. But they'll be using this technology to cipher out those people because they don't want those disturbances. So you've got to get the privacy into those networks. And so I think if I act now, because it's going to take a couple of years to develop properly, it's really complex, then, you know, we'll have an avenue into that realm, if you like, when that happens. And the reason it's Unreal Engine I'm using is because that seems to be the main tool that they're using. It's ultra realism in real time. You can build a digital world that looks just like the real world, and it's all connected into the 3D model. And it's just, have you ever seen any Unreal Engine stuff?
Not sure whether I have or whether I haven't, actually. Describe it.
Excuse me. So, well, basically, it's an application which is a coding environment with a 3D modeling environment. So you use the 3D modeling environment to create a photorealistic 3D model, which looks like the real world, and then you program applications on top of it. So you'll put your headset on and you want to be on Mount Everest. You'll have a 3D model of Mount Everest, and it will look just like Mount Everest. And then you can plug into that any application you can think of. So it'd be like the internet in a 3D space. And
well, how does that differ from things like IMAX 3D? Because I went to see an IMAX 3D film probably about 15 years ago with the headset. It's maybe they've just got it better, but to me, that was the full 3D experience.
Audio it's similar. It's similar, but because it's on your head, it's moving with you. Yes. And they've got this platform that they're making as well, and I think it's called the OmniPad. And if you walk in one direction, they've got these little rollers under your feet, and it will go in the opposite direction. So it's like you're walking, but you're not. You're still, but you're still walking as normal. So you've got your headset on, you've got this OmniPad, and you don't know the difference between the real life and the virtual life. It's exactly the same. So it's more than likely.
What's the point then? What's the actual point of that?
To put you into the Borg system.
Yes, so I understand that, but isn't that already there to an extent with computer gaming?
Well, yeah, and that's kind of where it's evolving into, and that's what Unreal Engine is. It's a gaming platform.
It's by a robotization, in my view, because there was a friend of mine actually. I lived in an upstairs. He lived in the upstairs flat. I lived in the downstairs flat, and this guy moved in, and he was very lucid, seemed intelligent, had a good personality. He started playing his computer games. And he would get so addicted to it, I could hear him literally smashing the flat up when it went wrong. And when I knocked on the door, he'd come down with the thing in his hands like this. And I thought, he's lost his mind, literally lost his mind. And there was a lot of people there, and I think he was combining it with smoking a substance, which made it 10 times worse.
Well, have you seen the videos of the VR people when they're on the VR? They're jumping out the windows because they forget that they're not in the real world, and they jump out the windows. I mean, it's really serious.
Of course it is. Of course it is.
But because that's where the world's going.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even if you spend a long time in front of a computer, well, this is my own experience of it. And also I've noticed it in a few other people, that if you spend too long in this world of the internet, when you go out, you feel kind of disorientated about what's going, it looks completely different, and it takes you a while to get back to interacting properly, or in your mind. Not, you might come across as though everything's normal, but to me, I feel a bit strange, a bit out of place. So it definitely does disorientate you, even on a basic level. So I don't know why anybody would want to give away their consciousness to something like that. But then again, I suppose the attraction is quite easy to take on board, because you go, oh, this is great. And before you know it, you get addicted to it. Because all this stuff's addictive, isn't it?
Well, think about it. You've got this poverty creeping up on everyone through all the inflation and all the social unrest that's been caused because of, everyone's in poverty. All the cities now are just terrible. They just look disgusting. They're not getting maintained. We've got no nice buildings around us anymore. You're not allowed into the wildlife anymore because they're going to put you in the 15-minute cities. People are going to find refuge in the VR headsets, and that's where they're pushing people to be.
Escapism.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that this is a major driver, is the escapism. So they make the reality purportedly as bad as they can. And this was in the Dr. Richard Day stuff from 1969. Which all happened. He worked for what became the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Planned Parenthood, and the Rockefellers. And this was all the social engineering, And it's called the Order of New Barbarians. You can find it at winnersontheworld.net if you want the collated stuff. It's all out there on the internet anyway. But that's what he was predicting, that you kind of get people to acquiesce by putting these traumas out there, which we all know what they are, whether it's a war, pandemic, whatever. And the drivers, of course, they're quite simple once you see them as drivers, and then you can get beyond it. But that, to me, is the real intelligence of being able to have an overview. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, they've got so many things going on, and that's what I was going to say before with the chips that they were producing. And at the time, it was all pre-planned. And you look at some of the complexities of what they're doing, and you wouldn't be able to do that, even if you've got a big think tank of really intelligent people. It's just too much for the human mind, even as a group, to process. So I'd say there's good intelligence there to say they've had really powerful AI for maybe a couple of decades at least.
Yes.
In my opinion, anyway.
Have you got any concluding remarks that you'd like to add?
Don't drink energy drinks when you're having a discussion. Well, especially when you're allergic to them. I think the end game isn't to entrap everyone, but the majority, because there's a trade-off. If you try and get everyone, the people who are on the outskirts, that's too expensive. It's not a good business model. You just go for the majority. That's all you need. The people on the outskirts, you never need to worry about them. That's always been the way. So there's always loopholes for those that can think outside the box. And that's what I've always tried to do. Look for those loopholes and use the technology they've got to your advantage, but don't get sucked in by it. Don't become assimilated, if you like. Stay on the outskirts, and then you can just live you can go and live in the woods if you want, and then come back to your office, use your VR headset if you want to, because it is fun. As long as you're not going to get consumed by it and become, a willing slave to the system, which is what they want you to be, but you don't have to be. It is voluntary at the end of the day.
And that is the difference between real intelligence and artificial intelligence.
Yeah, exactly.
Great place to leave it, actually, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's brilliant, Steve. I didn't want to go on too long because I think we outlined a lot of stuff there, and then we kind of got into a bit more philosophy at the end. I think that's great. Thank you very much.
Oh, well, actually, one more point.
Yes, one more thing. I was encouraging.
my friend, excuse me, this is why I'm saying don't drink the caffeine, because I'm allergic to it. It gives me a croaky voice. But my friend is a machine learning expert. Well, he works in a form of science that uses the same technology that they use in artificial intelligence with Bayesian inference, with Bayes' theorem. And he uses it. He's been featured in Space Magazine talking about time dilation and stuff like that. He's a deputy professor or something. He's award-winning academic from Sydney University and works at New Zealand University. He's one of the highest class academics you can know working in this realm. And he said, all AI is a marketing term.
Great. That is a really good place to leave it. I'm glad that you said that, because that sums it up perfectly. So,
from the very top.
There's always room for real intelligence.
Yep, definitely.
Thanks a lot, Steve. That was great.
All right, thanks, Mark. Catch you later.
Cheers.